Our next speaker, our co-chair, past district governor, qualified speaker, DTM, is going to give us a speech on flu, disease, trifecta, flu, RSV, and COVID. Flu, RSV, and COVID, the disease trifecta. Michael Osur.
Greetings, Speakers Bureau. Before I get started, I want to tell you my Michael Owen story, who just died yesterday. The Michael Osur, we often were at the same Toastmaster events. We would get each other's certificates by mistake. So I'd always say, "Hello, Michael O." And he would go, "Hello, Michael O." And that was our greeting for all those years. And I always appreciate that because I didn't know any other Michael O's. So he had a sardonic wit, very dry, sarcastic, but he had that British accent, get away with anything. And that's my memory of Michael Owen. So much to share with the group today. Let's talk about this for a second. Wow. If I can find the share button. Can you guys all see my background? All right. So I call it the tridemic, RSV, flu, and COVID. If the diseases aren't bad enough, why do we have 3 diseases to worry about this year? So what is this? We call it a tridemic. Maybe that's a media situation on the tridemic. And we'll talk about both RSV, influenza, and then finally COVID, because I have thoughts on everything. What is RSV? Have you guys heard about it before this year? Don't ask me how to say it. Respiratory syncytial virus. Predominantly, when I've seen it, it's only in young children and older adults. Now, there's no real cure for it. It's by supportive care, meaning you give them oxygen and you give them medications so they can stay hydrated. And most people do well with supportive care, and it goes in phases. Now, nationally, I looked this up, average about every year, there's about 500 deaths and 58 hospitalizations in children. You know, we don't want children to die of anything in this modern age with modern medicine, but there you have it. Now, older adults, these are usually people much older than me or Randy. There's about 100, this is over 65-year-old, 177,000 hospitalizations and 14 deaths a year because us old folks don't do as well. And there's been an interesting situation that happened when COVID hit. Now, this is a little chart here. That middle chart, you see the middle bump right there. That's the incidence of RSV pre-COVID. And then you see that it went away during COVID. And then this year, it hit November, December, it hit with a vengeance. And then boom, it was gone. It's gone totally. We were so afraid in November that this was going to take over and that people not only would die from COVID or maybe the flu, but also RSV, but it disappeared. Now, some of the mysteries of medicine we'll talk about toward the end here. Why did this happen? Aren't we glad it did? But you can see how scared you could be as if this was double or triple anything we'd seen in a number of years. Now, RSV does come and go, just like this, just like the flu, just like all these kinds of diseases we don't know what to do with. So would you say it's a miracle? Would you say it's just COVID took over, or is it just the luck of the draw? So we call it a tridemic, but we don't have to worry about RSV. As far as I can tell, it's gone till next fall. That's probably a good thing. Now, flu, influenza. Interestingly, the name influenza means coming from the stars. There's been flu as long as there's been recorded history. Nobody knew where it came from, but we've had it forever. And it seems to be something that happens in the late fall and winter, and then peters off in the spring, which helps us because the flu in Australia is the same flu we end up getting here. So they get the disease. We then fix our vaccines so that our vaccines match that strain of the flu. Looking at a 10-year incidence of flu, anywhere from 9 million to 41 million hospitalizations per year from the flu, predominantly in people over 65. Uh-oh, sorry, Randy. And about 35,000 deaths per year, usually from the effects of flu, which end up being pneumonia. That's why we have you get a flu shot, because it can make a big difference in preventing this. I hope you don't mind pictures of needles here. So flu can be very serious. But look what happened. You'll see here, the 2018-19 flu season was like any other. See that big bump? And then it goes away in the spring, and then boom, the 2019-20 flu season, 2020 flu season was pretty bad. Then when COVID hit, flu disappeared. There was no flu in 2021. I mean, none. Positivity rates below 1%, that doesn't even exist. So how could this happen? I mean, there's flu every year. There's bad years and good years, but there's never no years from flu. This is why I stayed in medicine and public health for 30 years, because not everything has an answer. And if you remember, that was a year we were very scared between COVID and flu, but it didn't happen. And then this year, flu hit with a vengeance in November. And here's a chart looking back through, I think, October, and it peaked right there. You'll see this is per week. You'll see it peaked in November and then early December. And by the time Christmas hit, flu was gone. That never happens. Usually it peaks over the holidays and it's terrible through mid-January. And then, well, it still could be bad in March. That's influenza B. But this is a chart as of January 24th, last week, in fact. This chart makes no sense for this early in the season. So we didn't have RSV, and we ended up not having the flu. I guess it's a good thing. And I've also looking at the flu deaths, they're down to maybe 17,000 or lower. I mean, this is considered nothing in the flu world, nationwide. So let's talk about COVID. Oh, there I am before we had to wear surgical masks. I have double masks. I had my bandana too. I'm still suffering from PTSD from March of 2020. Many of you had to work from home. Schools were closed, so the kids could drive you crazy. Everyone had to wear masks. And then in January 2021, we could get vaccine, the 2-dose regimen, 3 weeks apart, 4 weeks apart. Do you remember all that? How sick you could feel after that first dose? We thought the vaccine was going to save us. And then we'll talk about this. Then in the summer of 21, Delta, the variant called Delta hit, and all the numbers went back up. Then Delta went away in the fall, and between Thanksgiving and Christmas, the Omicron variant hit. Oh, we're never going to be done. Is COVID going to be like the flu? And the boosters. Now I keep trying to count. I had the first two. I had 2 regular boosters, and then I got the bivalent booster. We'll talk about that in a minute. So I've had 5 COVID shots, plus, thank you very much, Karen. I got COVID at the Toastmasters convention in August to add to that. So I feel I can do as well as anybody, and even I got sick. Just about 120 of us out of the 700 people at the Toastmasters convention. And I know Valencia's been up with all the Toastmasters in Vegas. I hope you guys don't get sick from that. So let's look at some of the data. I love this chart because it goes back all the way to February 29th of 2020. So that was the first blip. You see that blip there? right, probably May or June. And then we had a big blip. There's always blips around holidays, Thanksgiving and Christmas. That big blip in the middle, that was a year ago, January, when Omicron hit. Hospitals were filled up, COVID everywhere, and quite a few people, older people died. And then, boom, it went away, mostly. And you can see now at the very end there, these are 7-day averages. We thought the new variant, which is called XBB 1.5, is going to cause trouble. It's now the predominant strain, but people may be getting infected, but they're not getting sick from that. So you can see from this chart, and for those of you who don't believe in vaccines, clearly it's working. But I'm a Western medicine kind of guy. Others could say, well, it just ran its course. It's still with us, but I love this chart because it does show the reality. Now, the problem with cases is, since we all have tested home and don't report cases, we need to look at different numbers. So I like to look at hospitalizations. Even though I'm retired, I still live and breathe this stuff with my colleagues back in Riverside. So this is a 7-day moving average of hospitalizations in United States. And if you look at this, you'll see how January 21, we had that big peak right before the vaccines got hold of us. And then in January 22, that was a year ago, January, it was really bad again for hospitalizations. And now you saw just a little blip over the holidays here, and everyone expected to have a big incidence of it. Now, why is this? Why are the numbers lower? Well, approximately 80% of people in the United States are vaccinated. And well, not that many, maybe 25 to 30% had the first boosters. And we know that 15% got the bivalent booster, which specifically focuses on the Omicron variants B4 and B5. And then it turns out it's very effective against the new XBB 1.5. We didn't know that at the time. So is this vaccine related? But hospital admissions, you can't lie about those. Those are important. Now you can say, well, how many of those people are in the hospital for COVID? Well, yeah, but these are people in the hospital with COVID, whether they're there for COVID or not. Well, we can talk about that in a minute. And then deaths are deaths. There's a lot of controversy about deaths. If you die and you had COVID, did you die from the COVID? Well, you certainly didn't die from COVID before there was COVID. So I'd like to look at this as our deaths. And you can see here, look at 2020, there were a lot of deaths. And even in 21 and 22, there were a lot of deaths, but in 22, so look at this big drop the last year in deaths. And some people say, well, the vaccines don't work. And in fact, anyone here follow that wonderful governor in Florida, Ron DeSantis? He says that the bivalent booster causes you to get COVID. That's from his misunderstanding. When 80% of the population is vaccinated, who's going to get COVID? The people that are vaccinated. The beauty of having the boosters, though, I just looked this up yesterday, and a new study just out from the Centers for Disease Control looking at the first 3 months of that special Omicron-focused booster showed that it reduces symptomatic infection by 50% for most adults under 65. That's pretty good, because if you've had COVID, that sore throat, that cold, the fever, you just feel terrible for those 5 days. And for those over 65, it reduces our symptomatic infections by 33%. Because we're older, nothing affects us. But look at that reduction in deaths. Now, California just reported yesterday, and looking last year, they had 30,000 more deaths than they expected in California. That's even accounting for COVID and RSV and flu, and they have no idea why. Is it opioid overdoses? Is it people that didn't get care because they're afraid, they didn't go to their doctor's office, they didn't get treated for cancer? We don't know. But that's kind of scary just in California alone. 30,000 unexpected deaths that weren't from COVID. Wow. This is, again, public health is your whole lifelong journey, and you'll never know all the answers. So what happened? Now, some would say you can't have all those viruses in your body at the same time. You either have COVID or you have RSV or you have flu, and COVID seems to take over. I like that kind of idea of the different viruses fighting each other instead of me. Now, remember when we had masks and everyone wore masks and there was no flu that year? Could masks really work? Or maybe it's because the culture change of staying home when you're sick. Do you remember when we used to be tough? No matter how sick we were, we'd come to work and infect the whole office. At least we used to show how macho or how tough we were. Now you stay home when you're sick. Or maybe we know, in fact, this year, the flu vaccine exactly matched the H3N2 that was floating around, the version of flu that was going on in the United States. And maybe these COVID vaccines actually work. Take that, Ron DeSantis. But there has to be some explanation for why less people are dying. There's less hospitalizations, less flu. There has to be a reason that it's beyond just the luck of the draw. So as we end this little talk, some things don't change. I've never washed my hands as much in the last 2.5 years as I did in my whole life put together. But no doubt that washing your hands makes a big difference. So is staying home when you're sick. So you don't infect other people, which is the best thing. Hey, I'm a big believer in boosters. I'm a believer in getting shots. I now have to get shingles. I have to get my Pneumovax. Right? I got my flu shot. I got my COVID boost. I got 2 arms. Fill me full of all those vaccines. I'll live to be 100. Well, there is still this. I go to a lot of baseball games. They're outside. I haven't yet gone to basketball inside or a big concert indoors. That's a guaranteed way to get sick. And well, I told you in August, Toastmasters convention, 750 people there, and 125 of us at least got COVID. That was a large indoor event. It wasn't even that large. Makes me wonder about how the Bahamas are going to work. Maybe we'll do everything outside on the veranda. And will these diseases never end? They'll never end. 1918 was the last humongous deadly flu. And we have the COVID. And maybe it's something we just have to live with. Now, this week, if you heard, the CDC expert panel is going to recommend that we get a COVID shot every fall, just like a flu shot. And it'll match all the boosters. They'll figure those out in the spring, sorry. They'll figure out which variants to touch. And then boom, maybe you'll get a COVID a COVID and flu vaccine. After all, people seem to get flu vaccine. Maybe 50% of us, especially those of us over 65, they have a special version for us because we need the double dose. And that can make a big difference. And think if that, because remember, maybe we still get COVID, but the symptoms are less and we don't get in the hospital. And then you can live a long life. And that probably is going to be the recommendation. But I'm also glad that there's no more restrictions. We don't have to wear masks anymore. Though probably when you're flying and when you're visiting medical facilities, you need to wear a mask. But staying home when you're sick and washing your hands may make the difference. This is ever changing. This is my 3rd talk to this group in the last 2.5 years about the COVID. And maybe in 6 months, 9 months, we'll know better what the next phase is going to be here. I still keep up with it all. I talk to the epidemiologists all the time because, well, that's me. I have a lot to say about a lot of things. I have a few extra minutes. Are there any questions from the audience before Marilyn cuts me off? I can't probably see you. Judy. Yes, Judy.
Michael, I want to ask you, have you heard about the theory that when a virus or bacteria comes along, it kills off the weak ones, and then whoever survive are the stronger ones that those bad guys, bad bugs can't conquer. and they
Oh.
give up.
So the Darwinian view of disease,
Yes, survival of the fittest.
because
So we
no
are the
disease
ones
will
that
kill-
left
right, so
standing.
Judy's, yeah, no disease will kill everyone, even smallpox. But
No.
does that mean that people should get smallpox or polio or measles? Yeah, that's not survival of the fittest. Who would be left, and why should we have people get sick? We all want to live long lives. We want to help people. We want to see the next generation come along. Oh, Judy, I don't have to tell you, but no, we can't live our lives that way. Marilyn has a question.
Yeah, I have a question on possibly because people stopped with the sanitation principles. You know, after about a year of, I mean, during the first event of the COVID, everybody was sanitizing everything in their hands or washing hands. Now we stopped. And so that's possibly why some of it came back. And I think maybe we might have a lot more in California right now because we have a lot of border people coming in that were not tested.
I think we have plenty of COVID here without blaming people at the border or immigrants
I know, but they
or
also got,
undocumented.
I don't know.
I do. I see people washing their hands still. Wash your hands. You don't have to clean. Remember, you don't have to sanitize your food. That's not really how COVID is spread.
Well, some
But
of
it can
it.
be spread, and RSV can be spread that way as well. So
Sometimes
let's
you
not
do
blame
a lot of
others.
pesticides.
Let's not blame others. There's no need for that. And my time's about up. Maybe one more question. Anybody?
No problem.
Raise your hand because I can't see everybody.
I would like to make a comment, Michael.
Oh, please, Lois.
This has been a wonderful public service. Thank you so much. And your annual updates are fabulous. And so you have now put me back on the path of going forward with health and safety and new vigilance on the microorganisms that we can encounter out there, and bringing all the best practices together and keep us focused. Thank you, Michael. Thank you.
Wow, Lois.
This is well
Love
done.
it.
Thank you.
I praise.
It was well done.
And, well, and I'm a registered nurse.
I know.
This
Thank
is
you,
well
Speakers
done.
Bureau and
Thank you.
Tom Jameson. Back to you.